Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us this afternoon. I'm Vince Petrek. I head up the sales, customer success, and partners teams at PreVeil. Happy with you today. First of all, I think most everyone here joining us today is a customer of PreVeil, so thank you very much. We really appreciate our valued customers, and glad you could take advantage of this today. Hopefully, this is helpful for you and allows you to take advantage even more of the benefits that your PreVeil relationship entails. Let's go around the horn with introductions, then we'll kick off our session. Noelle, do you want to go next?
Sure, happy to. Hi, everybody, and I want to echo Vince's sentiments. Thank you so much for being PreVeil customers. We can't tell you how much we appreciate it. I'm Noelle Vestal. I'm the compliance officer here at PreVeil. So we're going to be walking through some of our compliance products today and really excited to share the information with you guys.
Very good. And also, I'm very happy joining us today is Yasmin Femia. She is our new director of customer success at PreVeil, added to the team. We're really happy to have her join. Please say a few words.
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Vince. Hi, everyone. My name is Yasmin. I am new to the customer success team here at PreVeil. I'm really, excited to kind of, build relationships with our customers and then kind of work with you. So my team is available and here to help. If you need anything, just reach out to us. Whether you know who your CSM is or not, just reach out at customersuccess@prevail.com and we're happy to assist you. Nice to meet everyone.
Very good. And behind the scenes, but not on camera, is Early Burlove, who's going to help be our master of ceremonies today, and she'll pop back into the question period as well. But anyway, let's go ahead and get started. The objective today is to help make sure you're getting everything you need out of getting started with compliance with PreVeil. And we're going to kick off with a little bit of an update on the CMMC situation. Let me go ahead and share my slides or the screen here, and we'll get going on the content. Okay, so there's always new information going on in the CMMC timeline. Just when you think the timeline updates have stopped, we have more. So I'm going to turn it over to Noelle. She stays a little bit closer to this than I do. What are some of the biggest news items recently, Noelle?
So the biggest one is what we have right there at the bottom, Katie Arrington. For those of you who are not familiar with who Katie Arrington is, she very much was the guiding force behind CMMC. Let you see here, she was the impetus behind it. It was her brainchild. She obviously worked with a lot of different people, but she headed up the entire CMMC program. So there were a lot of people who thought, oh, well, Katie's now out of the DoD. We're not going to do CMMC anymore. Well, Katie Arrington is not only now a part of the DoD again, but she's also the CIO right now. So she's pretty much controlling everything IT related, which would of course include CMMC. So she's come out very publicly and made it very clear that CMMC is here to stay. She has no desire to get rid of that. So if there were any of you who were hoping maybe this is the chance, unfortunately, no. CMMC is definitely going to keep moving forward. You'll see we have a timeline here. There has been a little bit of pushback on CFR 48. If you're familiar with CFR 48, you'll see in that second blue box on the right. That's sort of when that piece of companion legislation, companion to the final rule that came out late last year, when that piece of companion legislation comes out, then that's when those phased approaches that the DoD talked about in the final rule start. We do know at this point that it has been delayed a little bit. We're not sure for how long. At first, they thought it was going to come out in the first quarter, but it's probably going to be a little bit later, maybe like April or May. So obviously, whenever it goes effective will be 60 days after the date that it gets put in, when it actually gets put out on the street, like they say, you have 60 days of review internally in the government, and then it will go effective. On that effective date is when the phased approaches, those 4 phases the DoD explains in the CMMC final will start taking effect. So those are the big items going on with DoD and the CMMC program right now.
And I've just heard recently, Noelle, that there's been some RFPs spotted with CMMC requirements in them.
Absolutely. Yeah. RFPs, RFIs, RFQs, you name it, RF anythings. Yes, there are quite a few of them. There's also blanket purchase agreements. For those of you who are familiar with multi-year blanket purchase agreements, those are now coming out with the same requirement because think about it, most BPAs are about 10 years. For those of you who are familiar with them, in 10 years, all these phases will be done. So they need to be sure that you're actually on the path and you're going to be getting these things done. So absolutely, even though the companion legislation isn't out yet and those phases haven't started, it doesn't mean they still can't request for those things. So something to keep in mind.
So you're on this call, you have prevailed, you're working toward compliance, you're on the right path, and it's a good thing because you're going to need this. This isn't going away, so you're spending your time in the right place. Thanks, Noelle.
Of course.
All right, let me go ahead. I just want to, provide an overview. So, I mean, PreVeil isn't just about our PreVeil platform, encrypted email, encrypted file storage and sharing. We're a lot more than that. And I know many of you know that already. Most of you have already taken advantage of one of our compliance packages, either a pre-filled documentation package or full access to our compliance accelerator. We would certainly encourage the latter for almost all of our customers. It's a great value. Noelle and her team have put in years of work on this to ensure that we're giving you content that's readily usable for your CMMC compliance journey. And then, lastly, I just want to make sure, and some of you may not have already engaged, but we're continuing to grow our PreVeil preferred and certified partner community, technology partners, MSP partners, RPOs. These are the advisors in the CMMC space. And C3POs, those are the assessors. You're definitely going to need a C3PO at some point. They do the CMMC level 2 assessments. Last year, there was something called the Joint Surveillance Voluntary Assessment. That was C3POs and the DoD's DIBCAC audit team together. In the new year going forward, it's just the C3POs doing this. In the PreVeil preferred partner network, we already have about 25 or 30 preferred C3POs that we would strongly recommend you work with. But in addition to that, we have some great consultants, registered practitioner organizations, some really capable managed service providers that focus on services in the CMMC space, and some technology providers as well that can support you in various areas. So please make use of that. It's on our website. I'll give you more direction later how to make sure that you're getting the exact recommendations and suggestions for partners that you need. All right, so I'm going to cover the easy parts up front, and I'm going to give the harder parts to Noelle. I always do that during these sessions. So again, for many of you folks, you probably already have gone ahead with the deployment of PreVeil. I'm just going to run through this very quickly. So part of deploying PreVeil and the benefits, as part of this setup, you're going to meet your customer success manager. Whether it's the Yaz or someone on the team there on the customer success team, you want to know who that person is. That usually happens right up front. If you don't know today, still ask. Please send us an email at customersuccess@preveil.com, and we'll make sure you're linked up. If you did purchase access to the compliance accelerator, you're going to get those logins. That's a learning management system. It's not just a set of documentation. It's all laid out for you in order, how to go through your CMMC compliance journey. So you get that access. You're going to have your training and setup of your PreVeil environment with the PreVeil technical support team. That's always available for every one of our customers to do. So if you did set up your PreVeil organization without that support, want to have that incremental training, please let us know. We'd be happy to come back and help you with incremental setup or training support to make sure you're off and running. After you have the organization up and running, you're going to invite those users that you expect will be within your PreVeil compliance boundary, right? In your CMMC compliance boundary. Make sure those folks are in. You can change this in the future. PreVeil makes it fairly easy to move licenses between individuals, but you'll want to have that set up initially, and create those PreVeil accounts in your PreVeil organization. And then you'll want to train those users, make sure they understand the basic functions within PreVeil. We can help with that if needed. And we've got system guides, user guides, et cetera, that you can always take advantage of too. And they should, of course, would have some training, as they may already have, on basic control and management of CY and ITAR content. I just want to make this note too. Ensure that if you're an administrator, or ensure that your administrators that are managing the PreVeil system for you, validate that you have recovery groups in place for all your users. This ensures that no user can lose access to their account, even if they lost their laptop or their hard drive melted down or something like that. They could always recreate their PreVeil account with the assistance of the recovery group that's been set up for them. Some of you may already have got your PreVeil organization set up, the user trained. Maybe you're in the process still of migrating your existing CY and ITAR data into PreVeil, which is fine. The key here, especially if you have a lot of this content, is to have a plan for it, right? Determine the locations of where you have this today. Make sure you're addressing all that exists today. Decide on your PreVeil Drive folder structure that you need going forward, right? You can set up that, folder hierarchy. You can set up your folder shares. You can determine who's going to have access to which folders. You do that all up front and set that all up through the PreVeil Drive folder sharing process. If you'd like help for that, what are the optimal ways to set up the folder structure for, going down the road? Our support team will be happy to help you with advice and tips and tricks around that. Make your plan for moving the data. In most cases, customers can simply drag and drop it into PreVeil out of existing services, out of existing servers that they may have, etc. If you need to do a cloud-to-cloud migration into PreVeil, speak to our support team. They can help in many cases with that. If you have a lot of data, say more than 500 gigabytes that you need to move into PreVeil, definitely recommend you talk to our support team first and ensure that your plan kind of matches the optimal use of PreVeil going forward and that you set things up properly. So just keep that in mind. And we'll provide all that support, in the terms of your existing agreement. We want you to be successful with PreVeil. We're going to help you migrate the data in that you need. And then, once you've moved the content into PreVeil, we're going to protect it. We've got full backups, multiple facilities in the AWS GovCloud. So you don't have to worry about the durability of your data. We'll support that to 11 nines level, 99 and 9 nines after the decimal point. But you will want to cleanse that data out of any areas that are not NIST CMMC compliant going forward. So that'll be a part of your action as well. And again, just to make sure I think we talked about the emails here, customer success at preveil.com. Technical support is simply support@preveil.com. So just email them directly, regular email, and that'll automatically kick off the process of you getting immediate support. Okay, now I'm going to transfer this over. We're going to go into probably what you really came here for, which was assistance with PreVeil's Compliance Accelerator, how to get going your SASP, how to move forward with improving your SPRS score, etc. I'll pass it off to Noelle for a little while, and then I'll come back in with a few thoughts toward the end.
Thanks so much, Vince. So I'm going to talk through kind of the steps a little bit, and then you'll see the last one is a quick walkthrough. So the first thing I'm going to go over is logging in to the system. And like Vince was saying, and what Yaz was also chiming in as well, if you have any issues with logins, if you have any problems with that, please reach out to a customer success. They'll be able to help you with that, no problem. We're going to learn about some of the sample documentation. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, glitch on my side.
No worries. We're going to learn a little bit more about the Compliance Accelerator Defense Company. We just have a random company we invented. We refer to as Acme. It's the example company that you'll see in a lot of the documentation. We'll go over that really quickly as well when we get into the accelerator. And the accelerator is all 10 steps of compliance. So it's not just a procedural documentation that Vince was talking about, but it's also actual steps. Like he was saying, it is a learning management system. There may be some of you out there that's all you want. You're like, nope, I already know everything I need to know about CMMC. I just want procedural docs. Just show me where that is. Don't worry. I will show you where those things are. It's not a problem. But there are probably a lot of you out there that are also like, well, I don't know what to do. And where is my first step? And what am I supposed to do? So we'll walk through that a little bit as well. We also added a new module. It's addressing endpoints. We had so many questions from customers about how do I set up my endpoint? What am I supposed to do? Yeah, I have PreVeil, but like, what do I do with my endpoint? Because you guys don't cover that. What am I supposed to do? So there is now an endpoint course, and I'll also show you where that's at in the accelerator as well. And also how to schedule a call with the compliance team. So if you have compliance products with PreVeil, you have access to me and my team. So if you have any questions about anything or anything that we can help with from a compliance perspective, that's what we're here for. So with that, we'll just go ahead and I'll share my screen real quick. And here we go. So this is the PreVeil Compliance Accelerator. Now, these are two different offerings that we have for compliance. So you'll see compliance docs. Some of you may only have the compliance docs. That's our original offering for compliance. And then some of you may only have the accelerator. I have both just because, I'm the administrator. So you'll see here, please watch this video before proceeding. If you have any questions on how everything works or where things are, this video is meant to help you walk through that a little bit more, but we're also going to do a walkthrough today too. But if there's anything you forget about what I'm saying today, it is probably in that video. So let's look at a couple of things. The first course that we have here, and they're all called courses here because it's a learning management system. The first course we have here is additional compliance resources. When we were talking about how to schedule time, You see this? Schedule a call with a customer compliance call with us. So I will say that if you're working with one of our partners, please make sure that you as the customer are the one who's actually scheduling the call. There's a bit of confusion when there are partners involved, but it's just easier if you do it that way. These are not required in any way. This is whenever you need them. If you need a sanity check, you're not sure what you're doing or anything like that, that's what we're here for. We also, so there's all of the different steps here, but you'll see there's a couple 0 These are sort of extra courses. One is, how do I know if I need a consultant? Because we get that question all the time. Here is that how do I secure my endpoints? The video and the configuration step-by-step guide are all included here. I'll just do a super quick overview of this. It's specific to Microsoft Commercial plus PreVeil, which a lot of our customers use. So it actually goes through and tells you, each of the endpoints, and here are some examples of ways you could, different solution providers you could use for those endpoint controls. And then it actually goes into detail, how do I install PreVeil? How do I unsync OneDrive? All of those steps are in here for you. So again, and if you have any questions about any of this while you're going through it, you just let us know and contact us as soon as you can. The other thing that I want to point out, since it is something that's really important to a lot of people, is if you're looking for documentation help, this one that says documentation step 6 is very popular with our customers. The reason being is we've got a few different things here. We're going to talk about this more in depth in a moment, but this is our system security plan, which we're going to go through in just a minute. But there's also all of the procedural documentation that we were talking about here. And as you can see, there's quite a bit of procedural documentation here, and we are constantly adding more. These two here were just added, in this year, and it was from customer suggestions. So we're constantly updating based on customer feedback. If you see something in here that maybe isn't the way that you think would make it better, let us know. If you don't see something in here, let us know as well. We're happy to add it. So real quick, we'll go over that example company we were talking about. So you see here, this example company, 20 employees, there's 5. So it's an enclave situation. There are 5 that have CUI. In this case, this is a staff augmentation company. They only have 1 filing cabinet full of paper CUI. So we tried to find as many commonalities as we could when making this example company. So let's go back to the home page. So now we can go back over actually to the slides real quick, and we'll move on to the next part of the walkthrough. So system security plan, I was just kind of alluding to that. These are some things to remember about system security plans. If you take nothing else away from this call, this is very important stuff. Before filling out your system security plan, make sure you're familiar with it. I know that sounds really weird, but a system security plan for CMMC should be tailored specifically to the controls and objectives of CMMC. So be familiar with that and be familiar with the format of your SSP. And in this case, if you're using our SSP, just be familiar with that. Do a run through of it. Make sure you understand all the directions that are in it and all the different points that it makes. And remember, every control is interconnected. This is something that I know a lot of our customers struggle with. The systems, I get the question all the time. The systems, the standard operating procedures I have for access control, does that cover every single thing? And I'm like, well, yeah, but also there's a lot of other stuff that's interconnected with that as well. So we'll walk through that a little bit more too, just how there are so many different controls that sort of cross over each other. Also, remember to include the objectives. You do not have to explicitly point them out in the system security plan. We do that in our version. You don't have to do that. It's just easier for your assessor. But I will say, don't forget about making sure that you fully implement those objectives. If you have not fully implemented those objectives for that control, then that control is not closed. So make really sure that whatever statement you have in your SSP is addressing those objectives in some way.
When you say objectives, those are the assessment objectives?
Yes, correct. Thank you, Vince. So when you look at, and we'll see this as an example in the SSP, but I'm glad you brought that up. These are the objectives that are going to be used during an assessment to see whether or not the control attached to those objectives is fully implemented. So think of your objectives like a task list. It's like, here's your honey-do list for that control. I've got to do these 5 individual things in order to say this is done. That's kind of what an objective control relationship looks like, at least from an SSP standpoint.
Yeah. And how many of those are there for the 110 controls?
Oh, 320. Yeah. There's quite a few. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Which of course gets to a bit of the crux of the whole challenge with this. It's a lot to do. We get that. And that's where we're trying to help.
Absolutely. It could not have said it better myself, Vince. So many different customers when CMMC first came out were like, oh, the technology is just killing me. It's so hard. Now people are realizing, oh, the technology part is honestly way easier than the documentation for a lot of companies. And I don't mean to be cavalier. Compliance is difficult for everybody, but it is interesting to see the shift now that documentation really is a bigger stressor. And this is a really, really important one. The SSP is your guidance. Like, think of this as your guide for your assessor. They're not expecting you to have every single procedural document in there. You don't have to have your entire asset and inventory list inside of the SSP. You can link different things, which is why there's going to be a lot of different, like, for example, an asset inventory list is going to affect multiple different controls, right? So you could just, instead of having to put it over and over again inside your SSP, you link to an outside document. This one is incredibly important. Tell a compelling story that is honest and verifiable. That is so, we should just put that in like big lights and letters and like just whatever we can do. You have to be able to have an honest and verifiable story. So if you're telling the assessor in your SSP that you're doing something weekly, do it weekly and make sure that they can verify that. Make sure that there are meeting minutes or configuration settings or something, an audit log, something to verify that. So now that we've kind of gone over and sort of set the stage, I'll steal this back real quick and we'll talk specifically about the documentation step. So that's step 6 that we sort of went through real quick. So step 6, documentation. So at the top, you've got the document that is associated with this video, the slides that I use in the video, and then the system security plan. So you'll see this is a good example. This is a control right here, limit information access. These A and B are the objectives, like what we were just talking about. So as you see, this is all sort of boilerplate language. Meaning you could use it as is. You can change it if you'd like. It's entirely up to you. Anything here that's in bold and in brackets is an instruction for you or something to pay attention to. But you'll see all the PreVeil information is already filled out for you, for users, for administrators. It's your job for any other systems that are inside your CUI boundary. So for example, if you're using Microsoft 365 Commercial and you're using it for, identity access management or endpoint management or all those different types of things that a lot of you probably are using, this would be a good place to put Microsoft 365. If you have an ERP system where you're storing CUI, that would be a system that needed to be listed here. However, for the most of our customers, we find what they usually try to do is scope down as far as they can and end up in a situation where it's usually Microsoft or some other products that they're using for protection and then PreVeil. But again, everybody's going to have a different experience depending on your setup. So each one of these has information you'll see through. Again, the PreVeil information is filled out for you. Everything else is not. But what about on the controls that PreVeil doesn't do anything with, that we are 100% not part of at all? You'll see here controlling information posted or processed on publicly accessible systems. This is like, hey, are you posting CUI to your X account or to Facebook or, to your publicly accessible website? And there has to be a procedure for that. Okay, well, here's a whole procedure ready to go if you would like to use it, even though, as you can see, this control is out of scope of PreVeil. So all 110 controls, all 320 objectives, regardless of what we do or do not do in support of it, are going to be covered here in this document. Now, this is really great, right? I'm looking at this and I see, okay, cool. This is telling me what I'm going to be doing. Well, what if I needed more in-depth understanding? This is telling me what I need to do. It's not necessarily telling me how to do it because remember, we're telling a verifiable story. So if we go back to documentation, you'll see procedural documentation. This is that documentation we were talking about with the example company. So if I'm looking for standard operating procedures for access control, and let's say I'm looking for 3.1.22, controlling publicly accessible information. I'll look through here. These are all written as if you are going through an assessment. And they have been through quite a few assessments now. And we're constantly updating them and making them better. I'm sure that you probably don't have a location at 123 Main Street, USA. Probably not. I'm going to go out on a limb. HR@company.com is probably not your HR. So obviously you do have to do some updating in this. It's not ready to go the way that it is. However, as you can see, controlling publicly posted information, you've got more information here. It's more clear cut. You know exactly where everything's going to go. So as an assessor, if I go and I see in your SSP that you're going to be controlling it doing X or Y, I'm going to come here to see if that's actually happening. And there are standard operating procedures for each one of the families, but you'll also notice there's other information with those families as well. Like I said, it's not just the standard operating procedures, it's also the connecting items for that family as well. Thanks, Vince. Oh, POAMs. Everybody's favorite topic. So POAMs it's a plan of actions and milestone. So, okay, what does that actually mean? That means everything that you don't have fully implemented. So that's 110 controls, 320 objectives. Every single thing that is not fully implemented needs to be on your plan of actions and milestones list. Where you keep that is up to you. I'm going to walk through very quickly our POAM template that we have that actually already has all of the different objectives and controls that, we have no responsibility for already listed for you as a starting place, but you can always add and subtract as needed. The POAM list is not that is something that is a living document. I know that sounds kind of crazy, but it is. Not only is it a control, as you see 3.12.2 requires that you have a plan of action and milestone, but it's also you have to be able, again, to verify that you've done what you say you're doing. What's the best way to do that? Make sure that you have, meetings or stakeholder engagements in some way. Hey, who's going to be controlling this? Who's going to be taking care of that? Who's the point of contact for getting this implemented or that implemented? And you want to make sure that you have milestones, because remember, the M is milestones. So that's one that people forget a lot. And milestones means, hey, if 1 month you ended up, finding a solution for a seam that's really going to work well and you're investigating it more, put that in your milestone. If the next month you decide you're going to buy it, put that as a milestone. These things need to be there. There's not a requirement necessarily to have a meeting about POAMs, but it is something that definitely makes it a lot easier from a verifiable standpoint with the assessor. If you have those meetings, when I went through my assessment, I did that. It was a monthly meeting with all the stakeholders and kept a list, and it worked out great. But you do want to make sure that you're tracking those milestones. People forget that a lot. And let's go ahead and look real quick at not only the POAM template for PreVeil, but also the shared responsibility matrix for those of you who are unfamiliar with that. So we're in the documentation section. We're going to go back home now. You'll see on step 4 and step 5 have to do with POAMs. Step 4 is creating them. Step 5 is addressing them. They're both very similar content with kind of a different angle. And we'll look here. You have the POAM and the shared responsibility matrix. So in this POAM, I'll make it a little bit bigger. You'll see, for example, 3.1.22, we were just talking about that control. That is not one that PreVeil has anything to do with. So we've got the control plus the objectives. But you'll see here, this is just one objective and one objective from the same control. That means those other objectives either had a shared or inherited or something from us that we were assisting the customer with. Whereas 3.1.22, the entire control and objectives, we don't have any association with. You'll see there's an example of how to meet those controls and all those different items we're talking about. What is your plan of action? Who are your POCs? When are you starting? When are you finishing? What is the status of everything? These are the types of things you want to track. Do you have to track it in this Excel file? No. You could go ahead and use this and create a SharePoint list if you wanted to, or a smart sheet, or whatever it is or a Google Doc. It doesn't really matter. Or you can use it as is. That is the wonderful and terrible thing about CMMC, is that it's non-prescriptive. So you can kind of do whatever you want. We'll go real quick to the shared responsibility matrix. You'll see that's right here. You'll see too that the shared responsibility matrix pops up in a lot of these courses because it is kind of pertinent, but since we're already here. So this is our shared responsibility matrix, which will look at different controls and objectives. It gives the customer responsibility as well as the PreVeil responsibility, and whether it's shared or customer responsibility exclusively, etc. It's kind of hard to show this one because it's so long on the viewer, but yeah, there's quite a few of them in here. And if you want to download any of these files, unfortunately, when you view them up here, you have to download them here, which it's just something inherent to the LMS. So I want to make sure to make that point too, that if you want to download it, just click here. If you want to view it, you can click up here. If we can go back to the slides, Vince. Oh, yes, SPRS. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with SPRS, this is a requirement that, it started becoming a requirement back in, I think, 2019. And there is a DFARS, if you're familiar with, the DFARS regulations like 7012 or 7021, 7019 is a clause that you can find in your contract. Probably most of you have it in your contract, or your primes, if you're a sub, probably have this in their contract, with the requirement of putting in your NIST 171 score, which is your CMMC level 2 score, at the control level, so all 110 controls, whether or not you're fully implemented, partially implemented, not implemented, essentially. If you're fully implemented, then you get a certain number of points. If you are not fully implemented, meaning even if you're partial, you don't get partial points, it's kind of an all or nothing situation. So the SPRS system is overarchingly a comprehensive tracking tool for all government risk when it comes to interacting with a contractor. However, the SPRS score is specifically talking, in this case at least, for what we're talking about here, is the NIST 800-171 score. Now, this is the part that's really weird about SPRS. It is a score, it comes from -203 to 110 positive. It's the reason for this is there are multiple controls that have different weights. There are some controls that have 1 point, some that have 3, some that have 5. And so this is where we ended up. So if you're in a negative score, that's probably how that ended up. Or if you've heard somebody have a negative score, that's how that is. Because I'm sure you're thinking, well, how can I be negative? I haven't even done anything yet. But that's how that works. So we're going to take a super quick look at the SPRS site, which has a lot more information on it now than when I first started out here. So that's really nice. Thank you. They've got a lot more training available. So this is the link that we had at the bottom of those slides. This is the SPRS guidance. So there's a lot of different information in here, but you'll see the first thing that comes up here is a CMMC, level 1 self-assessment. You've got level 1 entry. There's also information on level 2 assessment as well. So all of that information is here. There's a tutorial here. You also can find more information up here where it says CMMC NIST. If you click here, you'll be able to get more information about all these things. There's also a really nice quick entry guide. This is something relatively new. So if you have questions on how to enter things into the system, it kind of gives you a step-by-step on how to do that. If you have additional questions about SPRS or need access to SPRS, that's something that you want to have a conversation with your government contracting person about. They should be able to get you access to this. If you're a subcontractor, you may not need access to this. Just check with your prime what they would like you to do. Some primes do want you to be able to input a score. Some primes don't. It just depends.
Yeah,
Thanks.
and really within a few months of deploying PreVeil and taking advantage of what the Compliance Accelerator has to offer, our hope is that you'll be able to update your SPRS score and make it much more compelling for anyone that happens to be looking in that system, whether it's primes or the government agencies who has access to that data. So that's part of our goal is to make that a milestone along your journey as well.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah.
All right, Noelle, I think that's the end of your prepared stuff, but Noelle is going to stay on with us when we finish in just a few minutes to handle questions. I know we received some really good questions in advance of the session. Please, if you have, I haven't been following the Q&A, but please put any additional questions you have into the question and answer here, and we'll try to get to as many as we can as soon as we wrap this up in a few minutes. So, I wanted to come back in and discuss just a little more detail, a couple other items, related to the Compliance Accelerator. Again, part of this process along this way, you will need a partner. At the very least, you'll need a C3 PAO to work with you on your assessment. Many of you will want some support at some point from an advisor, an RPO, or an MSP. On our website, we do have about 75 certified and preferred partners. This is a subset of our overall partner community. These are ones that have specifically been reviewed, vetted, trained on PreVeil, or familiar with PreVeil. Most have actually a PreVeil system that's operational for their users, the folks in their organization. They are familiar with the Compliance Accelerator content that Noelle just showed. And you can just imagine how much that would help you in your process. You're not just dealing with someone who needs to learn all about the PreVeil system, our encryption model, how we meet the compliance requirements. These partners already know that. So it's really valuable from that perspective. It's going to save you a lot of time and money. What I'd suggest is that, you can certainly look at our website and use that information to reach our partners, but even better is go to partners@preveil.com to send an email, describe your situation, specific what you're looking for, and our partner team will send you back a few excellent recommendations that are specific to your requirements, specific to your type of company, specific to your size company, et cetera, et cetera. So we can provide, or happy to provide for free, really some customized suggestions around which of the partners we think will work best for you, in more than one. So you can compare different types, different prices, et cetera, out there. And then, as you go through this compliance process, you may find you need more from PreVeil in terms of services or licenses that we can provide, right? Noel mentioned a SIEM, or some pronounce it SIM, SIM or SIEM connector. If you're working with a SIEM tool, PreVeil's logs are fully encrypted. We're a very secure system. What the SIEM connector will do is it'll automatically decrypt our logs and forward them to a SIEM tool. So just contact customer success or your customer success manager specifically for any help with that. If your compliance boundary is growing, you're finding out that you have more people in the path of CUI, that's not a problem. You can always increase the number of licenses you have with PreVeil. Just contact your customer success manager or customer success at preveil.com. If you're watching this today and you don't have access to the full compliance accelerator yet, and you want that, we can certainly make that available to you immediately. Again, please contact that same team and then get that set up for you within 24 hours. So just want to make sure you're all aware of that, those capabilities that our team has for you. All right, so those addresses are here at the bottom of the screen. Again, customer success is your customer success management team that's there to make sure you track through your compliance journey with PreVeil successfully. Technical support is our support at preveil.com. Any issues you're having, you need help with something, you don't understand why something's happening in the system, you need help with a feature and how to use that feature advantage, go to support at PreVeil. Partners is for dealing with any of the PreVeil partner community, and compliance is Noelle and her team as well. So they're available not only via the connection she showed you for the Calendly links for live meetings, but you can just send an email question to that team as well. And one of our CMMC certified professionals or CMMC certified assessors can help you with those questions. So that's the end of our prepared section. Orly, we're going to pull you back in and have you guide us through some Q&A.
All right. Great job, Vince, Noel, and Yaz. So we've gotten a bunch of questions presented to us beforehand, as well as a bunch while Vince was talking. So, let's go over some of the ones that were submitted in advance. And Vince, I'll let you and Noel figure out which of you is best suited. First one, what controls does PreVeil directly address, and how is the best way to attest to them?
So there's
Noelle, I'll give that one to you first.
Sure. There are about 37 controls that can be inherited from PreVeil. I want that big in bold letters, can be inherited from us. Please look at the shared responsibility matrix to get the specifics on how you can inherit from us. I'm not going to go into in-depth here, but if you look at the shared responsibility matrix, it'll break that down for you very easily.
Yeah, there's certain controls that PreVeil provides so-called sort of primary support for. I mean, there's always this. I find in compliance, there's not a lot of black and white. There's a lot of gray. So we're always up in a gray zone. So for about 37, PreVeil provides a good deal of support for. What we do in our system is directly related to addressing that control. We call those somewhat, inherited or primary support for. There's another 65 where we provide partial support for. I'd say secondary support, right? You're going to need people stuff, you're going to need process stuff, but the PreVeil technology also supports it, and we've got all that defined. So support for those 102 controls is all outlined in the detailed documentation that's in the accelerator. And as Noel mentioned, there's 8 that PreVeil system doesn't support, but Noel and team's documentation does give you access to pre-filled documents that do support those as well. For instance, your incident response plan. We have an excellent one that's in the standard operating procedures that's in the compliance accelerator, just as an example.
All right. Thank you for that. Next question here. How should one leverage PreVeil as a prime for our subcontractors?
Well, Vince, I think you probably deal with this quite a bit.
Yeah, I mean, this is becoming more and more common. We do work with many larger, tier 1 type suppliers who use PreVeil and then use PreVeil to communicate content with their subcontractors, which is a nice use. a nice use case, of course, for PreVeil. It's very easy to share content with third parties with PreVeil. What we now find is they come to us and they'll say, hey, the real issue is that my supply chain needs to be compliant as well. I'm going to be, flowing down the CUI to my companies in my supply chain, and they're not ready. So, we do work with our customers in those situations to help them flow down information about PreVeil to their supply chain, understanding that PreVeil is an excellent choice for their suppliers, especially small, medium businesses that are suppliers to them, to more quickly and easily achieve CMMC compliance. So that's becoming more common. Certainly you can speak to us about that. Please, contact any of those contact information we had before, or you can come into sales@preveil.com, and we'd be happy to engage and try to help make sure that your supply chain is getting in shape for CMMC.
Yep. All right. How does one get their SPRS score?
So that is through self-assessment. So that's the requirement in 7019 when I was mentioning that earlier. It is a self-assessment of the 110 controls and what your full implementation is. So it doesn't go down to the objective level because it doesn't give you partial points, but is with the understanding that all the objectives for that control would be fully implemented and that you fully meet that control. But yeah, it's all about a self-assessment.
Yeah. And you can do that multiple times, right, Noelle?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So you can do your SPRS score as many times as you want. Usually what we recommend for people is every 6 months, if you do have an update, make an update in SPRS, because that's a good sort of receipt, if you will, for the assessment team to be like, oh, look, you actually did, do what you said you were going to do. Okay, you put it into the system. But there's no hard, fast rule on that. You can do it as many times as you want. We just say 6 months is usually reasonable.
And just to note, one critical thing is that your SSP supports the SPRS score that you're submitting.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I'm actually going to combine two questions here. One that was submitted today, and one that was pre-submitted, because I think they play off of each other quite well. So the question that was submitted was, first of all, what exactly is FCI versus CUI? And then the question that was submitted today was, well, they've completed the DoD CUI training. How can I exactly determine what is CUI in the context of my company contract with the DoD? It says if my company contract with the DoD does not mention CMMC or CUI, can you provide guidance on what is the vetting process?
Yeah, there's
First is a definition. Just to repeat, the second is, how do you determine whether it is CUI?
Sure. So that kind of is, the answer is kind of the same for both. So FCI is federal contract information. So usually that's things like, honestly, even the emails that you send back and forth with government contracts can be considered FCI. It's very, very low level. It's CMMC level 1. It's about 17 controls for the protection of FCI. But FCI is like those administrative things associated with the actual contract itself, but administrative when it comes to the government, meaning those communications back and forth. It's not FCI if you communicate with somebody internally, about a contract. That's a different thing. Now, CUI is trickier. CUI should be labeled, should be the operative word, should. The U.S. government is aware of the fact that it has issues labeling its own stuff. They're very aware of that. They have been for quite some time. They're working to be better at that. But between then and now, what we usually recommend for customers as just a really good guideline, if you have information directly in support of a contract or in support of multiple contracts, right? And you have that information in your possession, and let's say it gets out of your possession into the wrong hands, could it cause harm to U.S. national defense? If the answer is yes, err on the side of caution and treat it like CUI. If the answer is no, it's up to you how you want to do that. Again, this is just a best practice. It is not anything that is, a requirement anywhere. There's nothing in the DoD that says you have to do that. This is just something sort of, it really is about risk mitigation and what level of risk are you willing to accept. So I hope that helps a little bit on the definition of CUI. And how to find
Noelle, should the bulk of CUI should be part of contracts that have the DFAR 7012 clause in them, correct?
Correct. However, DFAR 7012 is also added to a whole bunch of contracts where CUI isn't actually shared, which is where all this confusion comes from too, right? But that's a very good point. Unfortunately, if you do have a DFAR 7012 clause, you are required to have some instance somehow that is NIST 800-171 so that if and when they gave you CUI, you'd be ready to accept it.
Right. So I guess my supplemental recommendation would be if you're working within a DFAR 712 contract, again, that would be a time to err on the conservative side of is the CUI or not.
Most definitely.
All right. I think this is a question, this next question is going to be one that everyone, you, Noel, Vince, and Yaz are probably experiencing a lot. And that is, what is your advice for a company who's already a customer of PreVeil and they're in the process of customizing their system security plan to work with to work for their company? We have the format. They're just feeling overwhelmed by starting. There's that big O word, that overwhelmed.
Totally understand that. I very much understand. I like to tell customers, any customer on here who's talked to me before, I probably said this to you. My background is in IT. My master's is in IT. I spent almost 20 years in the government managing IT programs. The first time I looked at 800-171, I was like, who wrote this? I don't understand any of this. None of this makes any sense. This is so overwhelming. So if I can get overwhelmed like that, it's totally normal for you to feel overwhelmed. But what I would suggest is follow the steps that you have in the accelerator. That's why we set them up that way, specifically with numbers like step 1, scope your boundary. That is the most important thing you can do. If you're looking at your SSP right now and you haven't scoped your boundary, I would definitely recommend going back, really scope that boundary, get it as small and as tight as you can, and then start looking at your SSP. And that's going to help definitely reduce some of your stress because you're not going to have as many things basically in your boundary to worry about. That would be my biggest suggestion. Vince, did you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, I recall working with our compliance product team 6-7 years ago on our first response to how PreVeil supports the NIST 800-171 controls, but pre-CMMC. What was daunting was simply there was 110 of them, right? It's a big number. And when you have on top of that there's objectives, these assessment objectives totaling 320 that you really have to be able to address as part of an assessment, it's simply a big number. And I think that's one of the most overwhelming things. So my thing with any time there's something with a big number is pick off a certain bit of them to work on at a time, right? So first of all, take advantage, of course, right up front with what PreVeil provides and include as much of that in your SSP as possible and supplement that. And then work and try to work on certain areas, like maybe work on your endpoint controls specifically and get those handled. Work on the audit and accountability and get those handled. Put them in your POAM. That's fine. They can be in the POAM. Don't try to work on them all at once. Pick a subset, make it a definable amount, work on that over a period of time, try to get those done, move on. That starts to kind of almost gets it down into more bite-sized pieces. And that's what you'll see, in our content as well, is that you can just pull the content you need from PreVeil to address certain sections of the SSP.
All right, I'm going to take some questions from today's Q&A. How frequently can you do a self-assessment, and should you do it every time you improve? Should you do a starting assessment to determine your score at the beginning, and then with what frequency?
Everybody's going to love this response. It depends. Unfortunately, it really does. It honestly is up to you. If you have, there's a few different things to think about. If you have a prime that is asking for self-assessment more frequently, then obviously you're going to want to do what is in your contract for the prime. If you have, maybe you're the prime and you just have that one time, hey, I have to put something into SPRS and do my self-assessment. From a technical standpoint, you really only have to do it once a year. So you don't have to update it. Like, this is kind of what we were just talking about with the SPRS score. You don't have to update it until you have, enough updates that you want to add, or you feel like the score has changed enough, or you want to show significant progress, or you could start adding them all the time if you want. It's very much up to you. Our recommendation, again, still stands that every 6 months is usually fine for doing a self-assessment. Definitely do a self-assessment in the beginning before you start diving into everything you have to do with compliance. This kind of ties back into the SSP as well. If you do that self-assessment and sort of look, okay, like, where am I at? What do I actually think I need to do? What do I think I still need to get done? Because having that understanding helps immensely when writing your SSP.
Yeah, exactly. I just want to add that, once you go through your process, with your scoring, your self-assessments, and you feel like you're approaching assessment level stage, like you're ready for your assessment, a couple things. Number one, always please connect with PreVeil, partners at prevail.com, to get specific recommendations of C3POs that we'd recommend, and make sure you're working with a PreVeil preferred C3PO. Will make all the difference during the assessment. Number two, if in advance of that, we have some really strong RPO partners that offer readiness assessments. So if you just want to be prepared, make sure you're in good shape for your formal assessment in advance, please, again, connect with our partner team, and we can help advise, let you go to folks. That way, when you'll have confidence when you go in for that C3PAO assessment.
All right. Here's another question for you, Vince, from Monica. Monica says, we are a small manufacturing business and are hoping to self-manage ourselves through the process without consultants and just using the PreVeil resources. What's your experience for the success level of this?
That's a great question. And obviously the whole environment only has so many, I'd say, companies that have gotten 110 scores on their CMMC level 2 assessments. A good number of them are with PreVeil, but still that number, even for us, is only in the 20 to 25 customer level. So we're still at the early stages of really having folks go through that assessment process. What I would say is that if you're doing that process, if you're not already connected with Noelle and her team, please do that. I think we very much would like to work with some of our small customers closely as they work through this process on their own, because our goal is ultimately to be able to provide as much as possible in our compliance accelerator to allow companies exactly like yours to achieve this. So that's what we've been working toward all along. We're trying to get better every month, every day we're working on this. And so please be a part of that. I don't think there's a lot of data yet. I think you should be able to do it if you can maintain a small compliance boundary, right? If you can work with many of the processes that PreVeil has outlined in our standard operating procedures, as opposed to creating too many of your own, that'll help. Remember, all of our documentation has been reviewed by authorized C3POs already. So that's a real advantage. We know that the content in there is going to be acceptable to an assessor. Any new content you add, it's always a question mark from there, right? As to whether you're hitting the right topics, whether you're providing the right amount of detail, et cetera. So I think it's very achievable, depending on the resources you put into it, assuming you have enough general expertise to do it. When I've talked to folks at the DoD and the DIBCAC team, the objective of NIST originally was that you didn't need to be a cybersecurity expert to be able to implement these controls. They'll say that to your face. It was meant that any company could do this. So you should be able to do it. We want to be able to help you do it. Let's go do that together.
All right. We only have time for about one or two more questions. I didn't realize how late we were going, but I'll ask one of them because I know this is something on a lot of people's minds. It's the question is as follows: for a small company consisting of roughly 5 people, what are the advantages to using a VDI, and what control families would in turn be inherited by the VDI system? What are disadvantages?
You want me to take a first shot, Noelle?
You go right ahead. Yeah, that's a big.
Yeah, VDI is a popular topic right now. No question about it. Virtual desktop environments, they allow you to have increased control of your COI data, right? You're basically keeping it in a totally separate environment. You're still going to access it on your regular endpoint, but it's done. You're basically tunneling into another laptop or desktop that's sitting in the cloud, right? And of course, that will need to be in a FedRAMP environment. You have to make sure that environment meets all the DoD requirements where that's sitting. It can simplify a few areas, in particular, the fact that you can deploy all the endpoint related controls more centrally. So those are going to be deployed centrally in the VDI, because that's where essentially the desktop is inside that virtual environment. Which, it makes it potentially a little easier logistically than in deploying those on your individual endpoint devices. Although, as Noah mentioned, we have a tutorial and a detailed descriptions on how to do that yourself. So it is doable. So I think there's reasons for that. A couple of downsides on VDIs is that they're a bit more expensive. You're basically paying for this whole new environment in the cloud that has to be managed by someone in a FedRAMP compliant environment. That's not inexpensive to do. It's also, as you can imagine, a bit more inflexible. You can only use the software apps that are in that virtual environment. You can't use everything that's on your current desktop or what you're used to using today, potentially, without incremental expense to have the VDI supplier do that. So there's some flexibility challenges. There are price challenges. But on the upside, there is some increased ability for data control and maybe to make a few of the controls easier to address. Noelle, anything to add on that?
Yeah, I will say that absolutely echo everything that you said. VDI can make it really easy in a lot of ways. It definitely can. But remember, you're still going to have to do the same endpoint controls on that VDI. So you're not going to get out of doing the endpoint controls regardless. So just wanted to make sure that's really clear. But to Vince's point, it'll be centrally located. So you just have that one place. There definitely has been an uptick in interest in VDI, definitely from people who have organizations where there's an enclave and a subset of users, which is so many of you out there who are using PreVeil. PreVeil is great on a VDI. Now you want to make sure you have a persistent VDI. That also is a little costly. That's the other part of it that's kind of a problem. Persistent ones are way cheaper, but that you can't track any of the audit logging. So
Yeah,
that's
it has
going to
to
be
be
a
a persistent VDI. Thanks, Noelle.
Yeah.
But I want to add something else. Like this is something that's being discussed quite a bit. We have a few excellent partners, PreVeil, that PreVeil does, that offer PreVeil in a VDI. So if you're a PreVeil customer, and I know that's this audience here, and are interested in considering a move to a VDI environment, we can absolutely help you consider that through partners of ours that offer very impressive offerings in that space. So
Very
please
competitive.
let us know, and we'll be happy to help you with that, or at least to consider the option. But we'll support you certainly in your compliance journey, whichever way you go.
All right. Ladies and gent, I think we might be at the end of our time this afternoon. It has been wonderful spending time with my colleagues here at PreVeil and all of you in the audience.